The next solution I find really intriguing because it combines a couple of different things, but it essentially, and I'm trying to find the quote that I know is in here where you say, oh, here it is. Instead of trying to bridge the divide in our country, the Democrats should now widen it. And you suggest that the primary mechanism to do so would be to make it compulsory to vote in states like California and New York in particular, but all of the the so-called, I guess, blue states, the states that
The
uh,
17
the,
states that won for Clinton, at least.
and it's, I mean, most conceivable obviously in states where Democrats control
Yes.
the state houses, and certainly in California and New York can do that. Just between New York and California, if there was compulsory voting, you would see a rather than a 3.3 million vote gap, probably, I don't know, double that,
Well, I
maybe more.
didn't. I didn't count it up for. And I have to say, I had help with the math here, Sam. I'm embarrassed to tell you,
You
but
don't.
if
We're a complete math-free zone on this show. So
if you had, well, I'm supposed to do some counting as a lawyer, so I'm a little embarrassed that I needed help. But if California alone had some compulsory voting, and I'm talking about a system that is like the system that exists in like 25 different countries of the world, Belgium, Australia, others. It's not unusual, although it's not the majority way that democracies across the world vote. But let's assume that the same percentage by which Clinton won within a relatively low turnout, California, were extended if everybody voted. She would have won by close to 6 million votes just from that one state. She would have beaten Trump by, it would have added about, I think the exact number, let me check the article, it's 3.2 million
right.
to her national margin over Trump from one state. If you add in New York, if you add in the other, especially in the large population Clinton states, that would have become a disparity that is too big to ignore. Blow up the disparity, that's point one. Point two is that even having one or two or three states go to compulsory voting would set off a kind of chain reaction. First of all, we'd be a house divided. We'd have these Clinton states which have these huge voter turnouts, including in midterms, which I think is
Right.
absolutely crucial, since the midterm is really the device by which the Republicans control the country. You would have these huge disparities in the Clinton states or the blue states or some of the blue states and the red states, which are going in the opposite direction. They're putting in laws that try to restrict people from voting. So it creates a dynamic where you have a whopping popular imbalances between the blues and the reds. And you have truly started to create a constitutionally house divided in Lincoln's sense. And one or other of those republics, mini republics, republics within our broader republic, is going to prevail. It's not going to be that the country splits apart in a secession. One form will take out the other. I really, truly believe that if you had this kind of compulsory voting system, like Australia and Belgium and a couple of European countries, or even got the voting rate up from 57% to 80%, especially in midterms. And 80% is kind of the norm in countries like Denmark and others.
And we could
You
do, and
would
I should
start
just
to
say,
have,
we could do. There's many different ways of doing this. The vote by mail. I mean, there's a whole myriad of different ways of doing that. The practicality of it is not so much of an issue. But
Sam, that's where I disagree. I don't think vote by mail or anything else is going to make a damn bit of difference. It's really, the problem is
no, I'm
not that
saying
people
if
can't
we
get
were
to
to
the
do
polls, it's that they aren't engaged in it. And unless you make it a moral obligation as well as a political and legal obligation for people to participate in the republic, our side, the Democratic side, my party, is not going to be able to resist all the forces that are making the country more unequal, more unfair, more in despair. You have to correct all these minority rule mechanisms. These are minority rule mechanisms that are set up assuming that the have-nots are going to vote. That's what the founders assumed. Unless you bring in more of those have-nots, those minority rule defenses are too strong to allow the Democratic Party, which is supposed to represent that side of the country, from putting its agenda into effect. The only way to correct the Constitution constitutionally is to expand the number of people who are voting. And that is what we have to do. It's not necessary. It's not the sufficient condition. Expanding it isn't enough. There are other things that have to be done. But if we don't expand it, all those other things won't matter. You know, changing our pitch, you know, talking about deindustrialization more, being more like Bernie or being less like Bernie. None of that is going to matter unless you bring more people into the process. And they won't come in because, I don't know, there's some sort of atrophy of the spirit. And they aren't going to come in unless we actually make it a moral obligation or a legal obligation to come in, as it once was a moral obligation for people to come in. People in this country did vote at very, very, very high rates at one point because democracy was a cause. They felt committed to it. We were the only democracy in the world. We had to show that we were behind this thing. Now there's just this passivity which isn't going to change until you begin making it clear to people that they have a duty to do this. It's not just a right. It's a duty. It's an obligation. And our liberal reluctance, oh, well, we can't tell people what to do, et cetera, and just leave them alone on their iPhones. No. We have to tell them, you have to do this.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Over. Subscribe.